think a lot of people right now are looking at the world and going, wow, everything that I knew and all the signposts that made me feel like this is my reality and this is who I am and this is how it works, it's all falling apart. And ultimately, that falling apart is brilliant because it's the crumbling into the ashes that then the phoenix rises from. We're in the transmutation, in the alchemization, in the transition. But as it crumbles, it looks like it's the death of everything. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. Hello, beautiful people. How are you doing? Been trying to sit here and think about what is it that wants to be spoken to today. And so I'm going to come at it from what I'm tuning into energetically for this week, this time. It seems to me as if we're at this junction where it's almost as if we're experiencing two different realities almost playing out simultaneously. And there's this space in between that feels, it's this liminal space, this no man's land that feels like that's the space where we are in a pause point trying to redefine who the hell we are and why we're here and what we're doing. And on one side of that no man's land is the old structure that is just crumbling ever so rapidly. And in its wake is creating chaos and confusion and pressure, and it's inciting fear and anxiety, and it's the dissolution, it's the disintegration of all that was. And on the other side of the no man's land, on the opposite side of the spectrum, is this new land that is growing. And yet we might tap into it, but we haven't formed, how would I put it? We haven't formed yet the new, I don't want to use the word structure. Words are so limiting, but we haven't formed or forged the new life there quite just yet. And so this in-between liminal space of redefining, I think the reason why we can't get quite yet to this other side is because the redefining of who we are and what the hell are we doing here is what is going to create this new land. It's almost like when we can answer those questions in that liminal space, then the land and the beautiful structures will start forming themselves. They'll start appearing. I'm using this as a metaphor, but I actually think it's also probably going to be quite literal. So many people are in this transition of the old isn't working anymore. It's not even identifiable anymore. A lot of the signposts that used to say and show you, this is reality, this is how it works, this is who you are, this is who you are within that construct, they're falling. And so you have nothing to hold on to. And the analogy that comes into my mind, I've just dove right in, haven't I? That's what we're going to go today. We're just going to dive straight into it. The analogy that comes to my mind is, let's say you've been living in a house for your whole life, 30 years, 40 years. And there's a tragic event and it burns to the ground. And you're standing on the road. And there is, obviously, if that were to truly happen, that would be devastating, right? Truly devastating. But if I, as an example, had completely identified myself with that house, that I am the house, my life is that house, my reality is that house, I do not exist without that house because that house is my everything. When it's burnt to the ground, there would be a moment of such freak out because you would go, who am I? Where am I? How do I live? Because everything was attached to that bricks and mortar. Whereas what we're moving through right now is that if you were to see, you would step back a little bit and you would see the house has disintegrated, but you look around you and you go, oh, I'm in a neighborhood. There are other houses. There are other people. There are parks. There's a road. I would zoom out a little bit further. There's the block. There's the city. Zoom out a little bit further. There's the country. Zoom out a little bit further. There's the continent. There's the planet. I look above. There's sky. There's stars. There's sun. There's clouds. That zooming out is what we're going through right now. The zooming out is to say that little tiny construct that you found yourself in, the house, the metaphoric house, is not you. And it's actually hugely limiting, because look at, if you expand out and you see, oh my God, there's this whole world out there. That becomes so, like, from your human experience, that house was very significant. But when you zoom out, it becomes very insignificant because it becomes so tiny. Another analogy would be the bird cage. A bird that's been in a cage that thinks that's it, that's its life, and it identifies itself as this little bird that's inside this little cage. And the moment you open the door to that cage and it can fly out, there's a massively vast world out there that it can explore and that it can, embody itself within. So that's that liminal space, is that we're realizing that we have been contained in such a small structure. And that when we allow that to crumble, which is terrifying, what happens is that we recognize that actually that whole little ant farm that we've been in is so teeny tiny and insignificant in comparison to what is actually truly there. And a part of that is not just what's around us, it's what's within us, and it's who we are. Who we are is exponentially larger than who we've played ourselves as in this life. So, but that transition to get from this side of no man's land to the other side of no man's land is deeply unresting at times, because the attachment is going to be that, yeah, but it was my home and all the pictures and all my clothes and all of this, and this is who I am that, I am these things, I am these memories, I am these stories. And it's not to say that our memories and our stories haven't made us who we are today, but we are not those stories, because we are this moment. We are this moment as we are in this breath of life and of consciousness. Everything else that happened in the past is something that we can relate to as something that we experienced then, which has brought us to this moment, but it's not who we are, because we're not there anymore, right? So what I want to speak to today is this sometimes very uncomfortable and challenging letting go of who we thought we were. And in all the work, in all the years that I did the authenticity coaching with people, that was the hardest thing for people to let go of, was their identity that might have caused them so much misery and suffering, because it was attached to beliefs that they weren't good enough and that they weren't worthy and that their mother didn't love them or their father didn't love them or they were rejected by this person or that person. Letting go of that, even though it would liberate them from the suffering, was so deeply scary and painful, because at least it was an identity to attach to. It was something that was known and therefore familiar, and therefore gives the illusion of safety. When that liminal space feels so scary, because it's like, yeah, but who am I in that space? But this is the beautiful thing, is when you let go of the small I am the story, I am the narrative, I am the beliefs, I am my wounds, I am this and my life experience. When you let that crumble, you come to the real I am, which is the infinite, ever-present essence of who you are, that is connected to the source consciousness of all that is. So what we're doing essentially right now is we're removing the scaffolding, we're removing the cast that is around the sculpture, thinking that we were the cast, thinking that we were the scaffolding, but we never were. But it feels like you're removing the training wheels from the bike and going, well, shit, I don't know how to ride. You didn't even recognize that not only are you the bicycle without the training wheels, but you are the being that is driving that bicycle, right? That knows how to do it already. So that would be the soul self, and the bicycle is the human body. But the human body has been so limited and restricted within this like oppressive, fear-based, survival-based construct paradigm that we've been living in for so long. And we're letting all of that go so that we can, it's like the Russian dolls, right? So instead of going from the big one to the small one, where you take it out and you see it's like the little one, it actually would be starting from the little one and realizing that you are so much bigger than that. We're zooming out. So I want to speak to the fear that's coming up, that a lot of people are experiencing fear right now. And I just did this road trip with one of just the scariest drives that I've ever done, that I will never do again. That when I completed one direction of it, because obviously I had to come back home, right? After the fact, I really I experienced it as like, holy shit, that was so scary that I had kind of a PTSD response to it. Like it felt like a trauma. And I'm a very confident driver. I've driven in all sorts of countries, but it was just it was just something that very viscerally affected me. And so, of course, I had to prepare myself on the way back, because I was trying to find every other route to get back to avoid that. And I realized actually there really isn't another route right now. And so I had to do it. And I had done a little bit of work to prepare myself through a dear friend that did a BWRT session, brainwave recursive therapy, with me, which I highly recommend if you want to work with just something like instant like that. But really, at the crux of it, at the core of it, I had to face my fear. I had to face what was a very visceral, physical, like palms sweating, the heat coming into my arms, and the fear. Obviously, what triggered it was, driving through all these tunnels and viaducts, and the viaducts with the railing that looked like it just was set up with toothpicks, that if the wind blew, you run into it and there you go, you fall like a couple 100 feet to your death. Like that was my mind's fear, right? The fear that I actually was really facing was, I didn't want to have a panic attack. That the panic attack that comes because of the fear of what if that could happen, right? So the what if is very important, because that's the part that the mind creates a potential reality when it's actually not the current reality, right? But it goes into that space, and it goes into that space so convincingly that the body has a very, very visceral response, as if it were happening, or it's at the verge of happening. And so that fear comes in, that panic comes in. And so I had to mentally really prepare myself. And even as I got on that road, and I did do a little detour to just help myself out so I didn't have to do all of them. But when I got to the point where I had to face it, there was no way out but through. There were two things that really helped me. One was, I had to just stay in the present moment. And this is what we're breaking right now, is the illusion of fear. I had to stay in the present moment, because if my mind went into the story, if it looked at the chintzy ass railings and was like, I don't want to fall over that, my mind and my focus would go into that, and that would instigate the fear, right? So I had to just stay the course, focus on the road ahead of me, focus on my breath. I started chanting, which is not something I do every day, but I just started chanting Om Namah Shivaya, because it brought me into this focus centered, be here now, stay the course, look ahead of you. And, I would remind myself, like, relax my body, relax, breathe. So that was one thing that really helped. The second thing that helped was to remember, I am not just this. I am not just this flesh and bone. And so what's happening in this liminal space right now is that as the old is crumbling, the identity that we are just this human form and that is it, is being really stretched. That belief and that kind of view and perspective and lens is being very stretched, because maybe you found that you're having these experiences nowadays where you might oscillate between your vaster self and your smaller self, not superior, inferior, just different. You might be oscillating between the observer, the witness, and the human you that is having this visceral experience. When you can create enough space where you can be in the reality of both simultaneously, you can feel your human you having an experience, and you can feel your soul self being able to witness and observe it. The zooming out into that vaster awareness that isn't afraid of death, for example, in this instance of what I'm sharing, because it's infinite and immortal and it doesn't die, right? So what happened in that moment is I would remember I'm held by my higher self, my soul self. I'm held by source consciousness itself. I'm held by all of my guides and angels, whatever you might relate to and use the words for. I expanded out into something that's larger than me and reminded myself, I'm being held. I'm being held. I'm being held. I'm being guided. And that voice could lovingly come in and say, you're doing great. You're doing amazing. You're so brave. You're so courageous. Like, you're such a badass. Like, keep on going. It's okay. You're here. You're not alone. You're not alone. You're not alone. And it's almost like what's happening right now is that our physical third dimensional human reality is becoming so acute. Like, if I use the analogy of that drive, it was such an acute experience of fear, of terror, almost like it was terrifying in moments. It's almost becoming so acute and so concentrated because the only way to actually move through that point of fear and the story that comes with it, the what ifs, is to zoom it right out and then be able to recognize, oh, this is just a very tiny structure that in the large scheme of things is very insignificant. I'm not wanting to disrespect or to take away from how real it can feel. But if you zoom out, again, going back to the analogy of the house, you zoom out to the block, to the neighborhood, to the city, to the country, to the whole planet, you zoom out and you see the sky and the sun and the stars and the clouds and the space. That little tiny house is a little speck, right? So I think we're being given this kind of high-tech lens right now. I see it like taking a photograph where you could either go really into the micro or really come out into landscape widescreen mode. That depth of field is giving us a greater understanding of who we actually truly are. And that we've been in this little tiny version of ourselves for such a long time. And going back to the analogy of the cage, when we go through that cage, the liberation isn't coming out of that cage and being like, wow, I can go out into the world and I can fly anywhere I want. Like, yes, that's beautiful. But from the perspective of liberating ourselves, we open that cage door and it's like all of a sudden we can expand into who we already are. We land into ourselves. We don't have to go out to find who we are. We land into ourselves. And the key to opening up the cage is to understand, what are the aspects of your personality, your wounds, your fears, your insecurities, your belief systems, the narratives. Those are all the keys to then open the cage door to liberate yourself. But the liberation isn't anything that like, oh, and then I go find myself. The liberation is to recognize I've been in this tiny little compartment of myself. And then actually my entire soul self has always been there, but I've just been locked into a little tiny compartment within that vast space. So similarly to how I would think I'm only the house, I'm only the house, I'm only the house. And then you zoom out, especially when the house is no longer there, you zoom out and you recognize that there's a whole world, there's other things, there's other houses, there's other people, there's other communities, and then, the vastness of the sky. So this focusing in and out lens is reminding us who we truly are and the vastness of who we are. But unfortunately, or fortunately, or it doesn't matter, it's neutral. We have to drive the course in order to get there. And sometimes the course is really scary. Sometimes the course is like, I'm afraid I'm going to die. And so I think a lot of people right now are looking at the world and going, wow, everything that I knew and all the signposts that made me feel like this is my reality and this is who I am and this is how it works, it's all falling apart. And ultimately, that falling apart is brilliant because it's the crumbling into the ashes that then the phoenix rises from, right? The phoenix rises from the ashes. We're in the transmutation, in the alchemization, in the transition. But as it crumbles, it looks like it's the death of everything. And I go back to doing the work with people that letting go of the identity can be so scary because it's the thing that they've attached to that makes them think, if I have that, then I'm safe. If I have that, I exist. When I really boiled it down with people, it often would come down to the fear of not existing anymore. But see, that really can only arise when we are so identified with the container, right? Like if this body isn't here, then I don't exist. If the house isn't here, then I'm homeless, right? And you could say, okay, yes, you might be homeless for a period of time, but you actually still exist. You still exist. And this is what we're learning, is that all of these structures, all of these paradigms, all of these thought systems have kept us in a kind of prison. And we're realizing, we're seeing the vision that came into my mind actually this morning as I was meditating is, if I were to, I saw an image of a building, and that represented all of just everything, the chaos, the madness, the control, all of these things. And what has been kind of almost when we look at the pyramid structure, it's like the top of the pyramid, like the most important thing, that's the thing that people have been looking at for centuries, you could say. That started to shrink and get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, so that it became so small that it was like a little kind of tchotchke trinket that you'd find at a cheap tourist shop, like they have the little ones of like Eiffel Tower. As that was shrinking, I was seeing my soul self expanding, getting so big. And so my soul self was coming up on this angle, and the little image of the building was coming down to this corner. And I was seeing it kind of in this diagonal, kind of like this movement. Sorry, if you're not watching the video, it's not going to make any sense. And the point of this is because it was creating this space as if, oh, that's not actually a part of me. We can feel so fixated that we're in this reality, right? We're in the house, and that's all there is. And when you realize that, oh, that's an illusion, that is something that if I don't give it the importance that we were taught to give the importance to, it shrinks down to this little tiny tchotchke trinket. And then what you are is this, it's kind of like the fractal within the fractal. Then you see that you're holding this little tchotchke in your hand, and you're this whole big being in comparison to that. And this little tchotchke is so insignificant. Now, to the part that is identified with the tchotchke, what the tchotchke represents, it goes, no, that's not insignificant. It's totally significant. That's who I am. That's my reality. And without that, it's almost like there's this, you feel like you're going to implode. What I'm recognizing is that some people are going through so much challenge that they are being forced to let go of old habits, forced to let go of old patterns, forced of needing to let go of dynamics, relationships, family members, locations. Really, it feels like life is punishing them. But if you were to ask yourself the question, how is this happening for me rather than to me? What if I was not a victim, but this is actually a catalyst for me to get to a higher version of myself? But what is it that I have to let go of? And maybe that forced, you have to let go of that habit that actually has been, you think it's been a coping mechanism, but you don't want to be coping anymore. You want to be thriving. So all of these walls that we're being rammed up against that feel so punishing, and it feels like humanity is being put through the ringer right now, and it feels too much and unjust and not fair and not right. What if it was pushing us out of an entire structure that is just was never meant for us? And it's the cage that keeps us into this little tiny compartment of the vastness of, keeps us outside of the vastness of who we are. So let me rein it back in. I'd heard this voice earlier, that kind of higher self voice that just said, don't be afraid. And I know that's so much easier said than done because some people are really having some very strong visceral experiences right now. But just like I had to face my fear on that road, I could go into the story and that probably would have triggered a panic attack. Or I can go, okay, stay the course, stay here now. All that exists is here now. And the rest is it's the scaffolding, it's the cast, it's the schmuck that we just don't need to take with us anymore. It's the snake shedding its skin, right? And I think that these energies right now are so intense and in many ways so confusing. But if you can stretch yourself so that you can create enough space within yourself that you can witness your human experience and honor that, but you can also witness your soul observing it and holding it all. It allows us to get through the freaking tunnel that we're in right now. You know, we are in a birth canal, and there are going to be moments that are deeply, deeply uncomfortable. But the other side, like when I got through those tunnels and viaducts and I was on the other side, and I still had hours to drive after, but I just was like, woof. I was so relieved. I felt so liberated that the rest of it was like a piece of pie. You know, normally you go, oh, I still have to do this like 2.5 hour drive. And that's how it was just effortless because I felt so relaxed. And I was so happy that I'd been through the worst. And one thing that I just want to inject here is that we always have the resilience. We always have the stamina. We always have the energy. We may think that we don't, but if you're feeling in a moment where you're like, I can't take it anymore, Corinne, it's too much. My personal experience is too much. The collective experience is too much. I'm overwhelmed. Come back to your center and allow yourself to zoom out into your soul self. And this is why I'm so impassioned to look at things through the soul self right now, because I just believe that that's what's going to help us get through. If we stay in the tiny little home, if we stay in the cage, if we stay in the it's almost like I see it like this little Lego town or Monopoly board that we have thought is our reality. The crumbling is going to be really painful. It's going to be really scary. But when you zoom out into your soul self and you realize that you're looking down at the board, you're looking down at the game and you're going, wow, okay, that's happening, but I am not that. The ultimate question that we're coming into right now is, who is the I am that I am? That is beyond even this flesh and bone. We are at this junction, as I said, where it's kind of like two realities are coming side by side. They're really not confronting in a bad way, but it's like the mirror reflection. And we've been in reality thinking that that's all that it is. It's no different to when I was doing the coaching work and looking at it as people really thought their beliefs and how they saw through that belief, that was their reality. And it was the only reality possible. And the moment you let go of a belief, your perspective changes completely. Your reality changes completely. And you might have never, ever guessed that you could be living in that reality. And you never realized how blinding and how blinkering that limiting belief was. So this is no different. We have been in this belief that is believed this is reality. This is the only reality that there is. This is my identity within that reality. These are the signposts that make me sure that this reality is stable. And now all of that is crumbling, and it's so destabilizing and it's so scary if you believe that you are that tiny little structure, that you are that belief, rather than having the belief. You believe you are that belief. And then that's what's terrifying. So it's the disidentifying from the bricks and mortar. You are not the house. And that's why it can be devastating that the house burnt to a crisp, but you're still alive. You can still live your life. Rather than thinking, that's it, my life is done because I am that house. If that house doesn't exist, I don't exist. So as society crumbles, your identity within that will crumble as well, but you still exist. Does that make sense? That's what we're expanding into. It's like the aperture is widening and widening and widening and widening. The lens is getting so much vaster. Our peripheral vision is coming in. And peripheral and vision blah, 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 includes that intuitive vision, that bird's eye, eagle's eye view of life. And I just know from my experience going through those damn tunnels and viaducts that's what gave me the greatest comfort, is I'm not here alone, because I have this vast being that is who I truly am, that's guiding me, and I have source that's guiding me. And I want to rein it in a little bit more to something specific that happened. At one point, there was a car that I was driving behind. This is when I was taking the detour along a very windy, also kind of very steep road, but it wasn't the viaducts and the tunnels. And it was an old man that was in the car in front of me. And, we were driving really slowly. And there was such this wonderful, this feeling. And there's something very comforting about it, because it's like, oh, I'm following this man, and we're going at this nice pace, and I'm not alone doing it. So please remember that there are millions of us that are doing this at the same time. Our stories might vary. Even the feelings may vary a little bit, but we're here in this crazy, wacky, wild simulation experience, whatever you want to call it. We're here together. We're here together. We're not alone. And we're going to realize that to an even greater extent very soon. So let the scaffolding fall. Let the old crumble. Let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. We don't need to know. We don't need to control. We don't need to be ahead of ourselves. We don't need to be reaching and grasping for something. We also don't need to be reminiscing around the past, going, I am that and I was that. And here now, in this here now moment, knowing that you're not alone, knowing that you're being held, knowing that you're so much vaster and greater than who you've believed yourself to be for so long. And yes, you're going to have to face your fears on a very visceral level. But if you can zoom out and observe yourself and hold yourself as you move through your fear, you will get through the tunnel to the other side. And then there will be that inhalation, exhalation of you're free. You're free. So we are on the path to freedom, which just means that we are on the path back home to who we are. And it's not something outside of us. It's something that is already here, right here. We just need to land back into ourselves. So I don't know if that's made sense or if that's at all helpful, but just another reminder that you're not alone. We're driving the course together. And that the crumbling is a good thing, because out of it, the phoenix rises from the ashes, and what is to come is very beautiful. So keep going, keep believing, keep trusting, keep remaining in love. Let love, heart, authenticity, truth, humbleness, kindness, presence be your guideposts. That's the new reality, right? The rest is just monopoly. Let it go. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. Bye. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.